Echoes of the Void. Part 1. The Distress Signal. It started like any other routine mission. Commander Aria and her crew aboard the Orion's Edge were mapping a distant sector near the event horizon of a newly discovered black hole designated XG-79. Then the signal came. A weak, distorted distress call from a long-lost ship, the Solace, missing for 50 years. Then the transmission contained only 3 cryptic words. They're still here. The signal had no source at first, just a repeating whisper through static. But when the crew locked onto its origin, they found something impossible. The Solace adrift near the black hole, perfectly intact. The distress signal explanation. This opening sets the tone for the story, blending mystery and suspense. The Orion's Edge is on a routine mission when they pick up a distress call, something that happens in many space exploration missions. However, the distress signal is unusual. It comes from a ship that disappeared 50 years ago, yet the transmission is recent. The 3 words, "They're still here," create instant tension, raising immediate questions. Who is they? How can the signal still be broadcasting? What happened to the Solace? When they locate the lost ship, it's not wrecked or decayed, but perfectly intact. This defies logic and hints at a supernatural or cosmic horror element, something outside the boundaries of time and reality. Aria made the call to investigate. Against all odds, the ship appeared undamaged, as if it had been waiting for them. As they approached in a small shuttle, the closer they got, the more their instruments started malfunctioning. Scanner readings flickered. Life signs on the ship appeared and disappeared, as if people were there, and then weren't. Docking was uneasy. The ship's outer hull was covered in strange crystalline growths that pulsed faintly, almost like breathing. The airlock, rusted but still functional, opened with a metallic groan, revealing the darkness within. Then their comms crackled. A voice, barely a whisper, hissed through the static. "You shouldn't have come. A ship without time." Inside the Solace, the ship was untouched by time. Unlike a wreck that had been drifting for 50 years, the walls were clean, the lights dim but functional. It was as if the crew had just left, moments ago. Dax, the ship's engineer, pulled up the logs. The last entry was from the day the Solace vanished. The captain's final words were chilling. "It watches, it learns." But there was no sign of the crew. No bodies. No signs of panic. Just absence. As they moved deeper, something felt wrong. Shadows didn't behave as they should. Reflections in monitors were a second too slow. And the temperature kept shifting, one moment freezing, the next humid and suffocating. Then the first scream came. As the crew moves closer, they begin to notice anomalies. Their ship's instruments glitch, life signs on the Solace appear and disappear, and the ship itself seems untouched by time. The description of crystalline growths on the hull serves 2 purposes. It hints at an alien or unknown force at work, something organic and unnatural. It gives the ship an eerie, haunted look, making it visually striking for an audience. Then as they dock, a distorted voice comes through their comms. You shouldn't have come." This builds the idea that someone, or something, is still aboard. But the voice is warped, suggesting interference from whatever force is affecting the ship. Their newest recruit had been at the rear, checking a maintenance hatch. In the span of a single breath, he was gone. No struggle, no noise, just missing. Aria's team searched frantically. Scanners showed Hale was still on board, but every time they pinpointed his location, he was somewhere else. Then they heard his voice, far away, whispering through the vents. "I can see you, but you can't see me." One by one, the crew started vanishing. The vanishing crew. Explanation: this is where the horror elements escalate. One of the crew, Hale, disappears instantly, with no sound or struggle. This is terrifying because it defies normal physics. People don't just vanish. Their scanners still detect Hale's presence, but in multiple locations at once. This raises tension. Is he alive? Is he being copied? Is the ship distorting reality itself? Then his voice comes through the ship's vents. "I can see you, but you can't see me." This line suggests he's trapped in a different plane of existence, possibly observing his team from another timeline. One by one, other crew members start disappearing, emphasizing that this force is targeting them systematically. Only Aria, Dax, and Malik remained. They found something even worse, phantom-like echoes of the missing crew playing in reverse. Hale walking backward, a medic screaming in silent rewind. It was as if time itself was fractured. Then Aria saw it, her own reflection lagging behind. When she lifted her hand, it didn't move at first. Then slowly it followed. The ship wasn't abandoned. It was stuck in a loop. Now Aria, Dax, and Malik are the only ones left. They witness strange echoes of the missing crew. But these echoes behave oddly, moving in reverse or replaying their last moments like a recording. This suggests the ship is fractured across different timelines. The lost crew isn't entirely gone. They're stuck in these broken loops. Time is no longer linear on the Solace. Aria then sees her own delayed reflection again, confirming that she herself is at risk of becoming an echo. This moment establishes that the phenomenon is intelligent. It doesn't just consume people, it keeps copies of them. Time and identity are being distorted. The realization hit them. The black hole wasn't just a cosmic anomaly. It was something alive. It had been feeding off the Solace, trapping the crew in endless fractured timelines, learning from them, creating distorted copies to keep them there. As they ran for the shuttle, Aria saw herself at the end of the corridor. But it wasn't her. The eyes were wrong. The face was too smooth. It was learning to replace them. Here the true nature of the black hole is revealed. It is not just a gravitational force. It is sentient. Instead of simply pulling matter inward, it is feeding off energy, consciousness, and time, learning from those it traps, creating duplicates of the crew. This transforms the black hole from a scientific anomaly into an active threat, a being that watches, adapts, and hunts. When Aria sees a copy of herself watching from the end of a corridor, it confirms. The entity is learning how to replicate them. It might replace them entirely. There may already be duplicates among them. Breaking the loop. Dax formulated a theory. If they could overload the ship's reactor, the energy surge could break the loop. But it had to be done manually. Someone had to stay behind. Dax volunteered. No time for arguments, he said. Get back to Orion's edge and don't look back. Explanation. Dax realizes that to escape, they must break the time loop. And the only way to do that is by overloading the Solace's reactor. However, because the ship is in a distorted timeline, the controls won't respond remotely. Someone must stay behind. This sets up the sacrifice moment, a key emotional beat where a character makes the ultimate decision for the survival of others. Breaking the loop. Dax formulated a theory. If they could overload the ship's reactor, the energy surge could break the loop. But it had to be done manually. Someone had to stay behind. Dax volunteered. No time for arguments, he said. Get back to Orion's edge and don't look back. Breaking the loop. Explanation. Dax realizes that to escape, they must break the time loop. And the only way to do that is by overloading the Solace's reactor. However, because the ship is in a distorted timeline, the controls won't respond remotely. Someone must stay behind. This sets up the sacrifice moment, a key emotional beat where a character makes the ultimate decision for the survival of others. The sacrifice. Aria and Malik ran for the shuttle as Dax powered up the reactor. But as the energy surged, something stepped out of the shadows. A copy of Dax moving in slow motion, eyes hollow. The real Dax barely had time to react before his duplicate smiled and stepped into him. The console flickered, Dax's voice distorted. His last words before the reactor blew were, "I'm still here." Then the explosion came. The sacrifice. Explanation. Dax stays behind to trigger the reactor overload. As he works, he encounters his own duplicate. Unlike a simple mirror image, this copy smiles, a small but horrifying gesture that shows it is not just mimicking him, it is aware. The copy steps into Dax, consuming him just as the reactor explodes. Did Dax actually die, or was his consciousness absorbed into the loop? The last transmission. Days later, back on Orion's edge, Aria prepared her report. The official statement would say, "The Solace was lost. No survivors." But as she sat at her console, the ship's comms crackled. A soft whisper, a voice that shouldn't exist. "They're still here." The monitor flickered. Her reflection lagged 1 second behind, and then it smiled. Conclusion. This expanded version builds suspense and mystery while keeping a cinematic feel. It fits a 20-minute narrative with eerie pacing, slow reveals, and unsettling moments. Would you like me to refine it further or adapt it into a script format? The last transmission. Explanation. Back on Orion's edge, everything seems normal. Then Aria's console flickers. The last words of the distress signal, "They're still here," play again, but this time it's in Dax's voice. Then her reflection lags a second behind, and smiles. This final twist suggests that they didn't fully escape. The entity is still connected to them. The loop isn't over. It leaves the audience with chilling uncertainty. Are they still real, or are they now the copies? The last transmission.